You know, that feeling, right? That little voice whispering that you want to do something, maybe start a new hobby, tackle a big project, even just
Yeah.
have a tricky conversation, but you just don't feel quite ready.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some secret ingredient of preparedness you're missing, keeping you kind of stuck in neutral.
It's so common. Yeah. We've all been there, I think, standing at the edge of something we want, but feeling like the ground might crumble if we take that first step.
Well, today on the deep dive, we're laser focused on that feeling, that persistent sense of not yet. We've been diving into the insights of Russ Harris, particularly as they were discussed in a really thought-provoking video from Artificially Aware on YouTube. It's all centered around his book, The Confidence Gap.
Right. And our mission for you today is, well, pretty simple. To understand that nagging gap between what you intend to do and what you actually do, and crucially, to find some real practical ways to start closing it. You're here to get knowledge that's both deep and digestible, without feeling overwhelmed, and that's exactly what we're aiming for.
Exactly. Now, if you've explored self-help before, you've probably heard the usual advice. Believe in yourself. Visualize success.
Oh, yeah, the classics.
Right. And while those ideas have their place, Harris offers a refreshingly different, almost backward-seeming perspective. He suggests that maybe, just maybe, we've got this whole readiness thing totally wrong.
Yeah, what's truly eye-opening is Harris's core point. That feeling of being ready isn't the starting line. It's often what you gain after you begin. He essentially flips the usual script.
He does.
That sense of complete preparedness we keep waiting for, he calls it a mirage.
Okay, a mirage. Let's dig into that. What exactly does he mean by that? Why a mirage?
Well, if we think about how our brains have evolved, it starts to click. Our primary drive is survival, right? And for our ancestors, hesitation, a cautious approach, often meant staying alive.
Sure, makes sense. Don't poke the saber tooth.
Exactly. So that ingrained feeling of needing to be ready before we act is, in many ways, an overprotective safety mechanism. It kicks in even when there's no real danger, like, giving a presentation or something.
So it's like our brains are constantly on the lookout for threats, whispering, hold on, are you sure about it? Even when we're just thinking about, I don't know, starting a blog or talking to someone new.
Precisely. And this leads to what Harris calls the human paradox, this deep-seated belief that we need to feel confident before we can act, when in reality, it's often the act itself that generates the confidence.
Think about it, you, the listener. What's something you've been putting off? Writing that report, starting that exercise routine, having that conversation you know you need to have. It's so easy to just wait for the right moment, for that feeling of being totally prepared to magically appear.
And this raises a crucial question. What's the real cost of constantly waiting for that elusive feeling of readiness? Harris is pretty direct about it. He points to the consequence: regret, missed opportunities, and ultimately a life where your potential, well, it remains untapped.
Ouch. Yeah. That hits home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if this feeling of unreadiness is so deeply wired into us, where does it actually come from? You mentioned evolution.
Yeah, and this is where Harris introduces the idea of the brain as a factory of fear. It's constantly producing doubts, worries, hesitations. It's not that your brain is deliberately trying to hold you back. It's just doing what it evolved to do, anticipate and avoid potential problems.
So that constant internal chatter of you're not good enough or what if it all goes wrong, that's just normal brain activity. Seriously.
Basically, yeah. It's rooted in what's known as the negativity bias, our mind's natural tendency to focus on potential threats and dwell on negative possibilities. I mean, for our ancestors, being hyper-attuned to danger was a survival advantage. That wiring is still very much with us.
Okay, so those negative thoughts aren't necessarily a sign that we shouldn't proceed. They're just there. Like background static or something.
Precisely. And this is a really key insight for you listening. We often fall into the trap of fusing with these thoughts. We treat them as absolute truths rather than just mental events,
Fusing, like becoming one with the thought.
Exactly. That inner voice says, you're not ready, and we just take it as gospel. But Harris argues it's just noise, a byproduct of this fear factory in our brain.
Okay, so how do we turn down the volume on this noise then? How do we stop letting these feelings of unreadiness dictate our actions?
So Harris offers a powerful set of techniques under the umbrella of diffusion. Think of it as creating some space between you and your thoughts so you're not so tangled up in them.
Diffusion. Okay, let's get practical. What are some ways we can actually do that, like right now?
Well, one simple but effective technique is just acknowledging the thought without judgment. When that critical voice pops up saying, you can't do this, you can mentally say, there you are again, self-doubt. Just recognizing it for what it is can start to weaken its hold.
Kind of like noticing a persistent telemarketer. Yep, I see your call, but I'm not picking up right now.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. Another approach is to detach from the thought by visualizing it differently. Imagine the thought as like words on a screen maybe floating by, or picture it being spoken in a silly cartoon voice.
Okay.
You can even try singing your negative self-talk to the tune of "Happy Birthday." Seriously, humor can be a surprisingly effective way to diffuse its intensity.
I can just picture that. My inner critic doing a terrible karaoke rendition of its usual complaints.
Exactly. Or, as Harris suggests, try responding sarcastically, maybe internally, to your fears. When your brain tells you you're gonna fail, you could reply with an over-the-top, "Oh no, what a catastrophe. Thanks for the heads up, brain. Really appreciate it."
Right.
The goal isn't to argue with it, but to treat these thoughts as what they are, just thoughts, not necessarily facts or commands.
So it's about stepping back, observing the thought, maybe even making it a little ridiculous so it doesn't have this immediate power to stop us in our tracks.
Precisely. It's not about trying to eliminate the thought, which, let's be honest, is often a losing battle.
Yeah. Feels impossible sometimes.
Right. It's about stripping it of its power by seeing it as mere mental noise.
This is really changing how I think about those nagging doubts. I've always felt like the goal was to somehow silence them completely, get rid of them.
And that's such a common misconception. Harris argues that the fear factory will keep producing thoughts. It's its job. The key for you is to learn how to relate to those thoughts differently so they don't automatically dictate your behavior.
Okay, so we're diffusing from our thoughts, creating that crucial space. What's the next step then in bridging this gap between wanting to act and actually doing?
Well, Harris then challenges our common understanding of what success really means, because we're constantly bombarded with images of, wealth, power, external recognition as the ultimate signs of achievement.
The highlight reel version of success we see everywhere, right? On social media, everywhere.
Exactly. But Harris offers a different way to look at it, a much more internal one. Success, he says, is about living in alignment with your core values, things like kindness, courage, integrity, creativity, whatever they are for you in the present moment.
That feels like a much more personal and immediate measure, doesn't it? Not some distant goal.
Absolutely. And here's the empowering part for you. You can be successful right now by acting in accordance with those values. It's not some far-off milestone you have to reach. It's something you can embody with every single action you take.
So even if the outcome of something we try isn't what we hoped for, say, the project doesn't quite land, or the conversation is awkward if we acted with courage and stayed true to our principles, that's still a form of success in Harris's view.
Precisely. He emphasizes that even so-called failures can be successes if you acted in a way that reflected what's truly important. This definition puts success entirely within your control, independent of external results or validation.
That's incredibly liberating. Wow. It takes the pressure off the final outcome and puts the focus squarely on how we choose to act in each moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this leads us really neatly into Harris's fear versus dare model, which really brings his whole approach together in a practical, memorable way.
Fear and dare.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us more.
Acronyms.
Yep, acronyms. So fear, according to Harris, is what keeps us stuck in that feeling of unreadiness. It stands for fusion with negative thoughts.
Which we just talked about, getting tangled up.
Right. Excessive goals.
Setting the bar way too high.
Avoidance of discomfort.
Running away from anything unpleasant.
Yep. And removal from values. Losing sight of what actually matters to us. That paints a clear picture. When we're tangled up in our doubts, setting these huge, overwhelming expectations, trying to avoid anything that feels even slightly unpleasant, and losing sight of what really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no wonder we feel paralyzed.
Exactly. And the antidote, the way for you to break free from that fuel cycle is dare. Diffuse from your thought.
Create that space.
Accept discomfort.
Lean into it, maybe.
Yeah, allow it. Realistic goals.
Break it down small.
And embrace your values.
Keep them front and center. So it's a direct response to the things that hold us back. Instead of getting swept away by our thoughts, we create distance. Instead of running from anything uncomfortable, we accept it as part of growth. Instead of aiming for some massive, distant target, we set smaller, manageable steps. And crucially, we keep our core values front and center in our decisions.
Precisely. And Harris really stresses that every time that feeling of fear or unreadiness arises, you have a choice. You can get caught in the fear cycle, or you can consciously choose dare.
Let's dive a bit deeper into the accept discomfort part of dare. That's something I think a lot of us, myself included, really struggle with. We like comfort.
Absolutely. We're often conditioned, culturally even, to seek comfort and avoid anything that feels challenging or unpleasant. But Harris is very clear. Growth inevitably involves stepping into the unknown, and the unknown will almost always feel uncomfortable. There's simply no way to progress without encountering some level of discomfort. It's part of the deal.
So those people we look up to, the ones who have achieved things we admire, they weren't somehow immune to feeling scared or uncertain. They felt it too.
Not at all. Harris emphasizes that they achieved their goals by moving forward despite that discomfort, not by waiting magically for those feelings to vanish.
Right.
The crucial question for you isn't, how do I get rid of fear? Because, good luck with that. It's more like, how do I act even though I'm feeling fear?
Wow.
And the answer, time and again, comes back to acting in alignment with your values. Your values become your compass through the discomfort.
It's like the discomfort is the admission fee to a more meaningful and, well, ultimately more fulfilling life.
That's a great way to put it, exactly. And trying to avoid discomfort altogether often leads to a much greater long-term pain. The pain of regret, the pain of looking back and feeling like you lived a life smaller than you could have.
Okay, now let's talk about the realistic goals part of DARE, the R. I know I've definitely been guilty of setting these huge, overwhelming goals that just end up making me feel completely stuck before I even start.
Oh, you're definitely not alone there. We're often told to think big and dream bigger. And while that can be inspiring in some ways, Harris argues that excessively large goals can actually backfire spectacularly. They can feel so daunting that we don't even know where to begin, so we just end up doing nothing at all. Analysis paralysis.
It's like staring at the summit of a massive mountain and feeling utterly defeated before you've even taken the first step, just overwhelmed.
Exactly. So Harris's solution is surprisingly simple and immediately actionable for you. Break those big goals down into incredibly small, almost ridiculously easy steps. The idea is purely to build momentum.
How small are we talking?
Like, instead of saying, I need to write an entire book, the goal becomes, I will write just one sentence today. Or even just open the document. Instead of, I need to get into perfect shape, it's, I will do 5 push-ups right now. Or just put my running shoes on.
Okay, laughably small. Almost. The idea being that once you take that tiny, manageable step, it becomes much easier to take the next and the next, creating a kind of snowball effect of progress.
Precisely. Real progress isn't usually about these massive quantum leaps forward. It's about consistent small wins. Those little steps build confidence, they prove to yourself you can do it, and they keep you moving in the right direction.
So ultimately, Harris presents us with a pretty stark choice, doesn't he? He talks about option 1 and option 2. Sounds quite dramatic.
Yeah, he lays out 2 very different paths, and it is quite stark when you think about it. Option 1 is basically to only act when you feel like it, letting your feelings, particularly fear and doubt, be the primary drivers of your actions.
Okay.
This is the path of perpetually waiting for that elusive feeling of readiness, which, as we've discussed, may never actually arrive. It's waiting for motivation to strike like lightning.
Which could be a long wait. And option 2.
Option 2 is to commit to doing what needs to be done, what aligns with your values, regardless of how you're feeling in the moment. It's about moving forward, guided by your values, even when you're experiencing fear or discomfort or lack of motivation. Harris contends that every significant breakthrough, every meaningful achievement happens because someone, somewhere, chose option 2.
Wow. So staying stuck in option 1 is essentially choosing to let fear and that feeling of unreadiness call all the shots in your life, just handing over the controls.
Exactly. And clinging to the belief that someday you'll magically wake up feeling completely ready and motivated is, in a way, a form of self-deception that just keeps you from moving forward.
This ties directly into his point about feelings not dictating action. That's another idea that can feel really counterintuitive for many of us, I think.
It really can. We're often taught, or we just assume, that we need to feel motivated before we can take action. Harris just turns that completely on its head. He asserts that action often comes first, and the feelings, including confidence and motivation, frequently follow as a result of.
So you don't wait to feel like going for a run. You just put on your shoes and start walking out the door. And maybe the feeling of accomplishment and perhaps even a bit of energy comes afterwards. Or maybe it doesn't, but you did it anyway.
Precise. Successful people aren't necessarily those who feel less fear. Harris would say they feel the same anxieties and doubts as everyone else. The difference is they choose to act anyway. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for action. It's often a direct resulting action. It's earned.
This all makes a lot of sense conceptually. I mean, listening to this, I'm nodding along. But Harris emphasizes that simply understanding these ideas isn't enough.
Right?
That's not the magic bullet.
Absolutely not. He's very, very clear that consistent practice is absolutely essential. Reading about confidence won't magically make you confident, you know?
Right. If only.
Understanding the techniques of diffusion won't automatically silence your negative thoughts overnight. Even listening to this deep dive, while hopefully providing valuable insights for you, won't create lasting change on its own without you actually doing something with it.
So it's really about actively putting these principles into practice consistently in your own life, in the moments that matter.
Precisely. Courage isn't a trait you're born with. It's a skill. It's like a muscle that you build through repetitive action. It's, as Harris puts it, the relentless, boring, repetitive act of showing up every day, even, and maybe especially, when you don't feel like it.
The relentless, boring, repetitive act. I like that.
Yeah.
It takes the romance out of it, but makes it feel achievable. So if we truly want to bridge that confidence gap in our own lives, we need to commit to putting in the reps, right? Building that habit of acting in alignment with our values, even when that feeling of unreadiness is still lingering, maybe shouting pretty loudly.
That's the core of it. It's about demonstrating to yourself through your actions again and again that you can move forward despite fear. And in doing so, you begin to cultivate genuine, lasting confidence, the kind that's based on experience, not just wishful thinking.
Okay, so let's try and crystallize this for you, the listener.
Yeah.
The central message from our deep dive today into Russ Harris's work, as explored by Artificially Aware, is really this. Stop waiting for that elusive feeling of being completely ready. It's often a mirage, remember? Instead, start taking action, even in the smallest ways, guided by what truly matters to you, your core value. Confidence isn't something you wait for. It's something you earn through consistent action.
And fear? Well, it's likely to always be a passenger, maybe a noisy one. But it doesn't have to be the one driving the car. It doesn't have to hold the reins.
Remember, you are not your thoughts or your fears. You're defined by the choices you make and the actions you take, day in and day out.
It's about what you do.
So here's a direct challenge for you listening right now. Think of just one small thing you've been putting off because you haven't felt quite ready. Just one. Maybe it's sending that quick email, making a brief phone call, starting a tiny step of a larger project. Like we said, writing one sentence. Whatever it is, commit to doing it today.
Yeah, do it.
Not tomorrow, not someday when you feel like it, but like right now or as soon as you finish listening.
Because the distance between where you are right now and where you want to be isn't really measured in the passage of time. It's bridged by the actions you choose to take. Each small step closes that gap. And that choice, ultimately, is entirely yours.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Until our next exploration, keep acting wisely.